Elsie Featherstone by Ian Robinson. Elsie Featherstone watched the bus come up the brow towards her. She saw the surroundings through the lens of her own lifetime of experiences, living in the same terraced house in the same street, never away from the place for more than a week. If you made a film of her, you would soft focus back to the place in 1898, when Elsie was born. The streets would be full of horse-drawn vehicles and the bus would have been a tram. In a strange way, this Victorian world still resonated with her, even though it was now the early 1970s. Until recently, before the death of her father, this world imposed strict limits. She stood looking like Mary Poppins, a guidepost from another era, bearing the often deep marks of events long forgotten. Perfectly still she was, until her arm swung out like an old railway semaphore, signalling the bus to a stop. She stepped aboard, paid, then moved along the bus, looking for her friend Maureen Olorenshaw. Old schoolmates, meeting up for a jaunt to Manchester, to have tea and do a little shopping. She found the woman, haunted her own face with a tenuous smile, and sat down beside Maureen. Well, both of them could do what they wanted now. Since her dad turned his clogs up, Elsie no longer obeyed the beck and call of anybody. Maureen's man, her husband Jim, succumbed to a heart attack years ago. Elsie had never married, taking care of her ailing parents, first her mam, then her dad, for over 30 years, made her a very unattractive prospect for a wife. Killing him got her out of that one, but it came a few years too late. Maureen glanced across at Elsie as she sorted herself into the seat. "All right, Elsie." Elsie gave her a glance as if to say, "Why shouldn't I be?" But she simply said, "Aye, you?" Maureen nodded and then said, "Sorry I didn't make it to funeral. What with my sister taking so ill and all. You understand how it is." Elsie nodded and smiled slightly. Oh, she understood all right. But she said simply, "How's she doing now, your sister?" Maureen shrugged her shoulders uncomfortably. To be honest, Elsie's dad gave her the creeps. He made her so uncomfortable. Probably had that effect on everybody. As the dementia got worse, he became a trial to be around. She didn't see how Elsie had stuck it. First her mother for so long, and then him. And her with no sisters or relations to help. Still, she was free now, even if the game was almost over. So Maureen had used her sister's illness as an excuse not to go to the funeral. She blustered, she's a good bit better now. Doctor reckons it might have been, glandular." To change the subject, Maureen worked away at a bit of news seen that morning in the local paper. "Did you see Lumsden and Briggs packed in? Terrible shame. Firm's been here for donkey's years." Elsie narrowed her eyes. "Aye, nobody can compete with these foreigners, Mark my words. Quality trumped by shoddy Far Eastern plastic tat." So, Elsie had a head of steam on that one, eh? A pity. Maureen liked to be the one to break an item of news or gossip. She tried again. "Our Jackie's got an horse. They moved up to Holland's Brow last year to be out in country like. Well, now he's only gone and bought her an horse. Daft bugger." Ah, that seemed to have hit home. Elsie's eyebrow lifted, and she opened her mouth. This was satisfying work. "An horse, you say? However much has that cost him? Have they got a stable, like?" Maureen didn't answer as another diversion presented itself. A young lad sneaked behind folk in the queue and onto the bus without paying. Maureen said, "You see that? Cheeky monkey slipped straight past driver. Not paying his fare like that. I should say summat to driver like." To Maureen's surprise, Elsie said, "Oh, live and let live, Maureen. There's worse things going on, isn't there?" Maureen reckoned that this show of liberalism was uncharacteristic, and wondered if it was a sign Elsie was softening. Perhaps she might change her image if she was more accommodating towards the world. Dressed in black now for near on 2 months. Well, this wasn't the Victorian age anymore, was it? Elsie seemed to be trying her best to impersonate a vampire from one of those old Lon Chaney films. Her friend wore an old-fashioned black coat buttoned up to the neck, topped off with a black pillbox hat sporting a small black feather. The coat came out a little at the waist, but that embodied the sole concession to shape or fashion. Thick black tights and polished plain shoes completed the ensemble. The outfit suited her in a macabre way, but gave the impression of a strict Victorian governess. Elsie was aware of Maureen's scrutiny. She often looked at her like this, and Elsie knew what it meant. But this outfit made up part of her penance for the terrible crime she committed. All right for Maureen, a bonny girl from the start, amply supplied with nature's charms. Maureen hadn't had to take care of her parents for decades like Elsie. While her own life passed by, Elsie hadn't crossed her parents' minds. They saw only their immediate needs. Meanwhile, men fussed over Maureen, made fools of themselves too. Elsie would know no kind of closeness with a man. Oh, Maureen had done that all right, with quite a few men too, besides her late husband. With him not long in the grave as well. Not that it would make any difference now. Nobody lost their minds beating a path to either of their doors. A pair of wrinkly old has-beens, pushed aside into the margins of this world. That's what they were. Elsie considered this ruefully. She'd not achieved anything, really, except being a lackey. Maureen quietly nudged Elsie as that sight for sore eyes Catherine Chadwick came on the bus. Catherine's parents had been so proud of their daughter going to university. It was so sad that Cathy would never know what her parents thought of her. They weren't ones to praise or show that they were pleased. Any road. Compared to Catherine, the other women that boarded might have been wearing sackcloth. Catherine helped a young lad on. He seemed to be simple or handicapped. Elsie, back in Old Testament mode, judged it a scandal that these handicapped folk came on public transport. But by heck, Elsie had to admit, Cathy always turned out bloody posh, put on airs like a high-class opera singer about to meet royalty. Mind you, not the way to go in Elsie's opinion, although she seemed to enjoy the considerable effect on men. Catherine's charms, however, seemed to work less than kindly on Paul Harris, sitting on the opposite side of the bus. She would lay money on him having a few disgusting, lewd thoughts. It looked like his blood pressure was going way off the scale, although you had to admit, Elsie thought, Catherine did have fabulous legs. And those shoes, well, the perfect colour and style, really. She looked away with some difficulty, then harumphed to herself, as if to shake off thoughts she would rather not address. Maureen smiled wistfully. Oh, she's got all the curves in all the right places, that one. But a little bird told me she's... She mouthed something exaggeratedly that looked like lesbian. Elsie nodded. That was the talk, but Elsie couldn't imagine it, although, truth be told, she liked to try the idea out in the dark during lonely moments. Maureen whispered to a friend over the sound of the bus engine. Old Johnny Arkwright, at corner shop, said that she took silk, a barrister now. Elsie's eyes widened. Is that so? She'd be worth a bob or two then. What's she doing on bus? Should be driving a jag. Elsie allowed herself a prim chuckle. Maureen shook her head as if to register her amusement, then nodded. She's done well, anyway. It made Elsie feel small to hear of the woman's success. In a man's world, that girl had reached the top, and to cap it all, didn't need a man. It made Elsie feel very guilty, too. Cathy, an instrument of the law. If it got out that she... No, Elsie, don't go there. Elsie had achieved nothing in her life. Too late now. What future did she have at 72? That brought it all up again for Elsie, about her dad. 96 when he went, and as hale and hearty as a teenager. Just that his mind had deteriorated. He was always a nasty bugger, though, especially as he got older. The dementia seemed to have brought it out even more. He treated Elsie like muck, and made endless demands on her. No kindness in him. The last 10 years turned into a nightmare. Before that, her mother. The more terrible because her dad wasn't supposed to be disturbed, even though her mum screamed and shouted. He would come in and slap Elsie about, as if it was her fault. Hard to imagine that at one time her parents must have loved each other. There must surely have been some tenderness there. Anyway, all it had taken was a bit of polish under the mat at the top of the stairs. Was that so bad? Elsie's thoughts were interrupted by Maureen, coming out with a bit of tittle-tattle about Johnny Arkwright. "Hey, did you hear? He's got himself a new lady friend. I hear tell there'll be wedding bells." Elsie had heard, of course, but she said, "Is it anybody we know?" Maureen shook her head. "Who do we know that would be daft enough?" They clucked like hens. Then Elsie said, "Where are we going for tea, then?" I reckon Pauldon's will be open at 10:30 once we've got a bit of stuff done." Elsie nodded. "They've nice cakes there. Better than Rylands, anyway." "Aye. Cardoma's the best, though. Go there last off, before we come back." They planned to trawl the wool shops and remnant suppliers on the Salford side of town to get knitting stuff. Both women prided themselves on their knitting. Maureen's large extended family gave her reasons to knit. Elsie usually gave her creations away to the chapel. Elsie thought it was good sitting with Maureen and gossiping about folk. Nothing to be proud of course, but it took your mind off other things. Things that would never go away. Things like murdering your dad.